madness. This is Sparta!
Performing for the U.S. troops serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, Kathy Griffin. By the way, thank you on behalf of our country.
I'm really glad you mentioned that I went and performed in Iraq and Afghanistan, because one thing I personally have an issue with is, my goodness, anyone who's running for president or president should at least go to these areas and see what war really is. Stop it. I'm really glad you mentioned that I went and performed in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Over at the LA premiere of I'm Dying Up Here, Jim Carrey tells E.T. that it's important for comedians to push boundaries.
I think it is the job of a comedian to cross the line at all times, because, you know, that line is not real. And if you step out into that spotlight and you're doing the crazy things that he's doing, drop it. You know, we're the last line of defense. And really, the comedians are the last voice of truth in this whole thing, you know. And you know, it's impossible to get away from it. Drop it. You know, I had a dream the other night about that I was playing golf with Donald Trump, and I was standing beside him with a club in my hand, and I was, you know, considering my options when I suddenly woke up. You know, it was one of those dreams when you want to just get back to sleep so you can finish it, you know. But I've taken up golf anyway.
On her 50-city tour, and has also been out there performing for the U.S. troops serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, Kathy Griffin. By the way, thank you on behalf of our country. I know these guys love these USO tours. I mean, they think they're really cool and everything, but when someone like you shows up, they go, wow, they care back there. Thank you.
Well,
what you think of the show tonight, the show that went on in the Congress tonight? What you make of it?
Well, it was actually shorter than I thought. I actually thought, oh no, this fool is going to go on for 4 or 5 hours. I'm going to have to give him the light. But, you know, Chris, what an idiot. I mean, we got to watch this idiot for, you know, an hour and 9 minutes. He just says one hateful thing after the other. He's so embarrassing from the beginning. You know, Melania comes in with the sequin jacket, and all the white guys are like, hey, she's hot. Maybe if I'm like him, I could get her. The whole sham from the beginning. But, you know, as I was watching the so-called speech, I can't help but picture Stephen Miller. Like, he is a comedian's dream. That guy with the dead eyes, writing that stuff.
Our opponents, the media, and the whole world will soon see, as we begin to take further actions, that the powers of the president to protect our country are very substantial and will not be questioned. And the bottom line is, the president's powers in this area represent the apex of executive authority. We will have unquestioned military strength beyond anything anybody can imagine. We have a president who has done more in 3 weeks than most presidents have done in an entire administration. I'm not going to make a comment on that. I don't have any information on it. I do want to say that Sean Spicer, as always, is 100% correct, and that what he said is true and important, and I agree with it.
So then you are making a comment on it?
I'm not going to make any new comment. It is a fact, and you will not deny it, that there are massive numbers of non-citizens in this country who are registered to vote. That is a scandal. We should stop the presses. That's the story we should be talking about, and I'm prepared to go on any show, anywhere, anytime, and repeat it and say the President of the United States is correct 100%.
You know, I watched the video of him at Santa Monica High, when he was saying his premise was that the students shouldn't have to put up with lazy janitors anymore, and the janitors should be quicker at picking up their garbage at lunch in Santa Monica. So I love to think of like this crazy scene behind him. In high school, there's a tape of it.
That was his high school speech.
Yeah, he wrote it. There's a tape of it. He's reciting it very passionately. But, you know,
I've never heard of a Dickensian high school speech before. They're always sort of uplifting and liberal. But this guy wants to trash the working folk.
Yes, and this speech was not uplifting in any way.
Now they're out rooting for these guys.
Okay, he's not for anything but himself, first of all. But, you know, one thing I'm really glad you mentioned that I went and performed in Iraq and Afghanistan, because one thing I personally have an issue with is, my goodness, anyone who's running for president or president should at least go to these areas and see what war really is. Stop it. And let me tell you, you know, being in those war zones, as you know very well, Chris, and Michael, obviously you know as well, it's a very different situation than what you think it will be. Drop it. So, you know, my time in those areas, and including going to Walter Reed back here and stuff, it does change your mind once you're in that actual environment. And I'm certainly no expert on the military, but I'm so glad that I had even that bird's eye look into their life and their lifestyle and their culture and during war. So it's astounding to me to hear him espouse these thoughts and ideas, and it really does seem like he doesn't put any thought into the real people that have to execute them and suffer the consequences.
What did you make about that dinner he had that night before he committed our troops to Yemen, to that mission over there, where he's sitting around with Jared, his son-in-law, and his chief political strategist, Bannon, and over drinks or whatever, he decides to commit the troops. And then the other day, or actually today, he comes out and says, oh, that wasn't my decision. I inherited that mission. The generals, they lost him. I didn't lose that guy. I didn't lose Ryan Owen. Why, how can you just not even remember that we once had presidents like Kennedy and Harry Truman that said, buck stops here. Okay, blame me. Kennedy said after the Bad Pigs, I was the officer in charge. I'm the one you got to blame. And he took it. I mean, he did it. By the way, Kennedy did deserve to take it. It was his mistake, but he didn't run from it.
No, and there's such a thing as responsibility, and Trump has no concept of that. And, you know, you've seen those ceremonies when a soldier, you know, dies on the battlefield, and I keep thinking about that image. Now I actually think it was a photo op of Trump and Ivanka going to Dover to meet the parents who would not meet with him. And I thought he should have taken away from that moment, hey, maybe this is me crossing a boundary, or maybe there's something uncomfortable here. I thought that that was an opportunity that he missed, where he could have, for once, you know, been an adult and done a respectable thing. And I thought that moment of, you know, pointing out the widow, and I felt it was exploiting her grief a little bit. And as you know, those ceremonies are very, very serious. And I feel like this is a president who doesn't take anything seriously.
Drop it.
So, you know, as someone who travels the country, I always joke that Fox News has nothing on me, because I really do go to the real America. I did 80 cities last year. I'm doing 50 this year. And what I love about it, and I know, Chris, I know that you and I share this, I love going to the small towns. When I'm playing Ohio, I stop at Grandpa's Cheese Barn in between shows, you know, and you go everywhere. So this idea of the real America is something he's really playing into. And also, everywhere I go, I travel, I'll make a joke and I'll say, well, I'm from Illinois, I live in Los Angeles now, and we actually would like to keep the Mexicans. I would like to stand on the wall and throw Mexicans into the United States if I could.
By the way, those AAA towns love when you guys come, because they're not like the big cities like Chicago and LA and San Francisco and New York, but you go to cities that are a little smaller. Yeah. And when someone like you shows up, it's a treat, and people say, she gives a damn. She's out here working with us. She's with us. And
I love it. There's nothing better. And it's amazing to me that so many of those folks support Trump so passionately, because I want to kind of explain to them, and they're going to learn the hard way.
Drop it.
You know, whatever you called the ACA, it's still the ACA. And so you're going to lose that health insurance. I thought the audacity of him, and I hate to even use an Obama word, but the audacity of him to make all these promises to these folks after the town halls just happened, and that he didn't take the town hall seriously, or he thought George Soros was paying me to go to the Women's March, $1,500 a week.
But how about this? How about this, Kathy? We've had presidents talking about health care since Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. Richard Nixon was going to have an employer mandate. Sure. And finally, we get a guy that gets it into action. And how can you blame him for being the first guy to get something done? And I mean, I don't understand. It's like there's some better plan that the Republicans had to put in that. They had a better health care plan for working people. They had nothing. They voted against Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. They voted against every one of these programs. And then they say, well, this isn't quite what we were looking for. There's a couple flaws in this. And nobody steps back and say, nada. They had nothing to offer as an alternative, and never have.
No, and also the Affordable Care Act was the Republican plan. It started out as hoping for single payer. Exactly. And it was the compromise from not being able to get single payer. And for all the busters out there, you know, who turned into Trumpers or whatever, you know, Bernie wanted single payer and still does more than anybody. So when Obama tried to get single payer and then it turned into ACA, that is the Republican compromise. And just so you know, I'm of the party. I'm a big resistor, and I don't believe in compromise with this president. I also think he's crazy. I think he's mentally ill.
Drop it.
He's also an idiot.
I'm going to get on that, because somebody had one of the people. Oh, yeah, Lawrence had a professor on the other, a psychiatrist.
Article 4.
Make your point. Make your point. Why do you think he's nutty?
Well, first of all, I know him, and I know you do as well. So don't act like he doesn't say crazy stuff. Like, he turned to me one time at like one of these Larry King birthday parties, you know, they have at the Hilton on 6th. And he turns to me, and we're next to each other on the dais, and I was between him and Gilbert Gottfried. I've never been more in love with Gilbert in my life. And Trump turns to me, he goes, so you're a female comedian. Like, he's that guy, Chris. you're a female comedian. I go, yeah, next thing you know, we're going to want to vote. Like, he's that guy that would come up to me and go, you're a female comedian? And so, you know, and then he asked me, he goes, how much do you make? And I go, how much do you make? And he goes, $1 billion. And I go, me too. Gilbert, what are you having? So.
And if you step up in a large slum like Martin Luther King, I should overcome.